Welcome to this webinar on product optimization, on how to boost revenue and cut costs whilst maintaining food and beverage quality. My name is Birsam McCardle here at Camden BRI as Value Optimization Lead, and today I am joined by Danny Bayliss, who's leading the Future Technologies, Gleneric Potter, Packaging Team Lead, Susan Rogers, Section Manager, Sensory Insights, and Sarah Thomas, Section Manager, Consumer Insights. So product optimization is the process of identifying opportunities within a product's end-to-end life cycle to reduce cost or add value. This may be through, for example, replacement of an expensive ingredient, shelf life extension, or process improvements. And these are just some examples. Within optimization, products can become more cost-effective, consumer relevant, and competitive. How can product optimization be applied within the food and beverage industry to reduce costs, to maximize revenue and profitability while maintaining product quality? So within this webinar, we will be looking at 4 strategies: recipe reformulation, shelf life extension and storage changes, product portfolio rationalization, and process optimization and new technologies. So the focus of this webinar is to look at product optimization, focusing on reducing cost. So looking at the first strategy, recipe reformulation. Recipe reformulation is the process of changing the ingredient or the composition of an existing product whilst maintaining taste and quality attributes. So products are reformulated for multiple reasons. These can be for the reasons of cost of the raw material going up, supply chain issues, new government legislations, or the fact that the total product is no longer viable. Recipe reformulation, when you do a recipe reformulation, the product has to be validated. So when a change is made to a product, the new version needs to be validated against the existing product, which we call as control or the reference. To assess the impact of the change, testing at the different stages of the product life cycle needs to be conducted to minimize the risk to the business and ensure the product is successful when launched in the market. So the processes, the stages to explore is the manufacturing process, looking at the fact that the food has to be still safe, so making sure that product shelf life is maintained and no microbial growth is going to be happening. Product needs to be sensory evaluated to make sure that the product tastes the same as the control. And of course, the product is still accepted by the consumers. So when you make a change to a product, the product has to be validated at those stages.
So in terms of recipe reformulation, looking at sensory testing approaches then, depending on the changes that have been made to the products, it would be highly beneficial to conduct some form of sensory testing, mainly to establish whether the new product is similar to the existing recipe. By applying discrimination testing with a trained sensory panel, are the products similar? If not, is there a noticeable difference between the samples? Following discrimination testing, or perhaps in place of it, if sensory differences are perceived between the new and existing samples or products, then we can apply descriptive profiling to evaluate the products. What this will do is identify, describe, and quantify the sensory attributes between the samples. The descriptive profiling approach, or sensory characterization, as sometimes it's referred to, provides more detailed information regarding the nature and size of the sensory differences between the products.
So once you've actually completed your changes to your recipes, it's really advisable to have a look at what the consumers think. And here you'd be testing your original existing product against maybe your different prototypes. And depending on the test objectives, which depends ultimately on what ingredient changes you've done, you might be conducting consumer tests in a number of different ways. So one of the initial ones, particularly maybe if you've done a substantial ingredient change that has significantly altered your product description or your product offering, you may actually want to go back to the initial concept, mock up some packaging, look at those descriptions and see how the consumer responds to those and whether those are still acceptable within not only the product experience that they're used to, but also in relation to your brand. Secondly, you may want to follow that through with some physical taste assessments, again, comparing existing to the new prototypes to look at sort of the hedonic side of consumers, which is looking at their liking across the different modalities, but also drilling down more deeply into the attribute assessment. So if you've been altering maybe the salt content or sugar content, or you've been switching in different key ingredients that have affected the balance, the different flavor profiles, then you really want to know some feedback on how the consumers are perceiving those different intensities and balance of those flavors, and also the textures. So are they satisfying and coming together well in that eating experience? And then also within that taste assessment, you want to look at whether they're wanting to continue to buy the product, whether they're looking to switch, if you're particularly looking at maybe line extensions or switching in from competitors. And that will give you a much better understanding of how well the product is performing from an eating experience. You could combine that with the concept assessment of the new packaging and proposition that you're going to put forward. And then the alternative to that, maybe if you're looking for either a smaller scale and very early on in this, where you might want to do some usage and attitudinal studies and get some interaction with either the ingredients that you're looking to put forward, or if you're developing new prototypes from the recipe reformulation, where you're trying to understand particularly the consumer journey from maybe first acquiring the product, storing it, cooking with it, cleaning up afterwards, looking at those delighters and those areas that you want to change. So there's all sorts of assessments you can do with consumers to better understand how your new, revised, reformulated product is performing. And most importantly, you're sense checking this to ensure that you haven't got any erosion on your brand, that you will maintain the sales and possibly even grow your sales by looking at opportunities of current people who are maybe not buying your product and looking at the competitor offering, and you're hopefully safeguarding that competitiveness in the marketplace.
Second strategy for looking at product optimization when looking at cost optimization is shelf life extension and storage consideration. So optimizing your storage conditions and extending the product shelf life could be beneficial to the manufacturers in reducing their energy costs. So going from a high low temperature to a higher temperature can save on energy usage, transportation, and also actually at retail. So meaning if you go from cold storage to ambient, you can save on your transportation cost, and also looking at minimizing product waste from spoilage. So if you were to extend your shelf life of the product, you can reduce the amount of product that goes that spoils, and that's therefore can reduce the amount of waste. So that's therefore you can actually be allowing for wider product distribution. Supply chain simplification as well. So if you go from standard to ambient transport rather than refrigerated, that could simplify your supply chain, meaning you have more opportunities to transport your product, so you're not limited by the number of companies or freight companies that can do that. For example, on a bakery product, by reducing the water content, you can extend the shelf life of the product, which can thus reduce the waste as well as allowing you for a wider distribution.
Okay, so packaging is going to be key to maintaining and extending the shelf life of your products. So it's important to understand your product requirements and what the shelf life limit limiting factors are to have optimised the packaging materials that you're going to be using. Also, understanding the environment your product and packaging is going to be exposed to over the duration of its life can steer you towards the right choice of material. So when reviewing what packaging you're using, its functionality can help determine what you're determine that you're using the right material and whether an alternative may provide a longer shelf life. If you can understand what's limiting the life of your product, you may be able to adapt the materials you're using, and you may find you can change the material you're using for a lower grade maybe, and at reduced costs, and it will have no impact on the shelf life. However, you may also find that you could improve the packaging you're using. So if oxygen and moisture are an issue, you could look at materials with improved barrier properties, for example. There may be a cost implication, but you may find additional benefits such as shelf life extension, which may result in a longer supply chain, which then could boost revenue. Packaging optimization is not just about looking at the actual materials, but the whole process. So things like the creation of poor seals or damage during transit and storage will all impact on shelf life and then cost. So it's important not just to look at your primary packaging, but all the packaging being used. Your optimization journey may also look at the processes you have in place to make sure you're getting good quality materials on intake, that you're creating good seals and transporting the product in such a way that damage doesn't occur. So packaging is going to be really integral and may also be key to optimizing the desired shelf life.
The third strategy we will explore now is the product portfolio rationalization. Product portfolio rationalization is the process of reviewing and reducing the number of materials and products within your portfolio. This will reduce complexity, allowing you to leverage purchasing scale and boost gross margins. So this can be applied at ingredient level, meaning your raw materials or your formulation, your packaging as well as the finished product, meaning actually what's already in the retail market, looking at your stock keeping unit to see, you know, what are the ones that are not performing and can be removed from within your portfolio. So just focusing on the material portfolio. So often teams work in silos when developing new products, meaning they are sourcing new materials similar to those that are already existing within their overall business supply chain. So often recipe or formulations within the portfolio should be reviewed to identify similarities. So before, you know, looking at developing a new product, within your supply chain or within that operations or manufacturing plant that your product is going to be produced in, you know, you should really look at to see what raw materials are already existing within that area to see if you can identify any of those raw materials or formulations that are already existing, which you can use. So products with similar ingredients should be reviewed to determine if the number of raw materials could be reduced. So the main purpose of your simplification of your raw material portfolio is to see so you don't add any new materials into the supply chain, but also to identify if you know, any raw materials can be reduced, meaning have products been developed where a raw material is very similar to another one. Can you actually then you know, look at to see if you can actually combine, you know, use one raw material instead of 3 or 4, because all the additional ones are actually very similar. So can you actually remove those additional ones, and therefore instead of buying potentially 5 different raw materials that are very similar, can you then qualify to only buy one? Therefore you're increasing your volumes, and then you'll have a better purchasing from the supplier. The other way to look at it is looking at existing finished product portfolio. So businesses introduce new products within their category. So looking, you know, with different formulations, different pack formats and sizes to offer consumers greater choice and manage product price points. And also to remain competitive as well. But over time, these additional SKUs add complexity, especially for the supply chain and manufacturing, and thus increase cost. So finished product portfolios should be reviewed to identify whether low-performing, low-margin and non-strategic products can be delisted. So if you look at the chart here, you know, if you plot all the products that you've got, you know, you've got low volume and low margin SKUs at the bottom that are, you know, don't have a high low revenue. But then you see the high performing SKUs at the top. So really the focus should be on to see what those low volume products that are bringing you know, low profitability for the business, can they be removed, you know, by removing this or by delisting, and then focusing on profitable products. Manufacturers can reduce complexity to the supply chain, increase efficiency, and then thus reduce cost. And actually, this is a strategy that you know, most businesses apply, and some businesses have a case of one in, one out, meaning to launch a new product, you've got to delist a product that, you know, and the one that the business will delist is the one that is actually low performing.
So packaging rationalisation, as with ingredient rationalisation, is firstly looking at whether you're using the right materials and whether any could be reduced or removed across your product categories, taking control of your stocks and your supply chain, all with the aim of removing excessive packaging and driving down cost. So rationalisation needs to start right back from the intake of your raw ingredients and materials. So what are they arriving in? What are you storing these raw ingredients in? Through to production, where you're producing your products, and then through the supply chain. So your process could involve removing any excessive packaging or non-value features, or looking at alternative materials, or maybe even reconfiguring how the product is transported. But eliminating materials doesn't necessarily mean removing them altogether, but reviewing whether the size of the seal area could be reduced, maybe taking away some layers of a laminate, or taking away layer pads from a pallet or a box. Could the range of materials be reduced? So can a material being used for one product be used for others? Can the variety of different sizes and formats of the same product be condensed? Rationalising the number of products can have a big impact on reducing the amount of materials being used and potentially cost. Optimisation of packaging isn't just about reducing the amount of packaging you're using, but more about using the right packaging. So, for example, you could increase the gauge of the outer cartons. This could increase the amount of product you can actually put on a pallet, so you can stack it higher, and then this could actually reduce your transportation costs. So again, it's about looking at the whole process. Another way could be, again, increasing your packaging, and then this reduces the level of damage which you're getting, which is resulting in shorter shelf life, and then an increase in waste and customer complaints. Again, the material cost might be higher, but if you look at the cost further down the chain, you can justify the choice of materials and therefore the cost by reducing waste and costs associated with complaints. Availability of materials, as we've seen over recent years and continue to see, can fluctuate and are heavily influenced by external events. And in some instances, we've seen products temporarily removed from the supermarket shelves. So reviewing your supply chain and the materials you're using may help with alternative sources, and also finding multiple suppliers of your material may open up negotiations to reduce costs. Care does need to be taken, though, that any removal or change to your packaging does not impact on shelf life or cause damage to the product, resulting in an increase in food and packaging waste. If any changes are made, consider what assessment of the packaging and the product is required to ensure the safety and quality of your products.
Okay, so now is the last part of this webinar with regards to sort of looking at the process for optimization, or whether you can utilize new technologies to help ultimately save cost on the bottom line. So the real first thing I would say to any manufacturer that wants to really look at their processes and really optimize is to look at their existing processes and really challenge those existing processes. So the manufacturing has been set up and it's been in position for many, many years, and most people will just sit in the factory and say it's always been done this way, and they'll never really push on why a process is always being delivered in a certain way. The one area we would challenge back on manufacturers is challenge every process. Is the retort being processed for an extra length of time for an extra safety margin? Can that be reduced? Not only are you going to increase throughput, but then you're potentially going to start to reduce the amount of energy that's used per kilogram of product. The same with things like mixing technologies. Have you really looked at optimizing the mixing technology to reduce that amount of time that the mixer is on? Or is your factory running chillers And are the chillers operating at the right levels, or is certain parts of the factory running at a colder temperature? Should you start to really look at the consistency of your current processes to see where there's immediate savings? And that requires very little investment upfront from a company. So that's improvements in current processes is the first place we would always sort of suggest manufacturers really start to look at and challenge. The next area I'd say is would require investment, but modern equipment. Many food processors and food manufacturers will run a piece of equipment till it dies, and then they'll rebuy it. And sometimes they'll just rebuy the same piece of equipment because it's always done that job and they'll trust it to do the same job again. But that doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be the most efficient. Some modern equipment may have changed, may have evolved. Their process efficiencies may be better. They may be running more efficient, so they're consuming less electricity. If there's certain motors and stuff that's in them, or the way that they're operating means they could get better throughputs for your product, so they're more economical over the lifetime run of the equipment, but also the production runs. So looking at modernizing some of your equipment would be a definite area that would be worth considering, because you can actually find some downstream savings with regards to sort of how efficient they are running. The third area we'd look at would be sort of advanced developments in a certain technology area. So the picture that's just on this slide is of a new way of doing stable emulsions. So this is a counterflow injection system, but most people will be using traditional homogenizers. So is there a new advanced development in the technology that might give you a step change, might be more efficient, might give you more throughputs, also might give you some energy savings that could really start to affect the bottom line of the product, improve the quality or improve the life and the longevity of the product, that ultimately then will add to the bottom line of the cost. Okay, so the other area I would recommend is looking at new technologies to market. So not just developments in existing capabilities or evolutions of technology concepts, but something that can offer and unlock a completely new area with regards to sort of manufacturing and processing, which can ultimately benefit you on the cost of the bottom line for the processing. So one technology I wanted to give as an example would be using pulsed electric fields. And pulsed electric fields uses high voltage electric pulses to punch holes in cell structures. So looking at plant cell tissue, particularly potatoes for potato snack products, if you punch holes in the potato cells, you can actually replace the heating stage that would be normally used in some of these for French fries or crisp manufacturing. What that means is they could have a massive reduction in their energy consumption. Heating requires a lot of energy, and by utilizing this technology up front, you no longer need that heating, and therefore you can get this massive energy saving, which will impact on the bottom line dramatically for this particular product. But not only is this one of the advantages, there are numerous other advantages by punching holes in the cell tissue for these potato-based products. So it reduces the cutting force, wear on blades, so they last longer. You'll get less product breakages in the line, so you'll actually reduce waste on the line. You can increase your yield on the line, so you're getting more product out for the same amount of energy, so you're being more cost effective with your actual processes. You're reducing starch losses, and you're even reducing oil uptake. So the amount of oil you're buying, you're actually consuming less in the making of the product, particularly for French fries and crisps. So therefore, you're making that ingredient that is costing you go a stretch longer, so you don't have to purchase it as often. So new technologies can really unlock a completely different avenue of how to process and unlock some potential process benefits as well as cost benefits. Okay, so the last area I wanted to talk to you about would be automation. So within automation, there are many advances in the robotics world, and the cost of robotics is starting to come down. And it's becoming more competitive when you start to think of the cost of labour or labour shortages or the availability of suitably trained staff and personnel that's available in the food and drink industry. So robotics is starting to make inroads with regards to actually manufacturing processes where you're handling product. And the ability to be able to automate simple processes means you can then move those staff around to more added value tasks. So automation is definitely going to be playing much more of a stronger role within the food and drink industry. And there's already companies developing computer simulations, digital twins, where you can have already a digital version of your factory. So you can really start to understand all the different processes, the controls. Is there bottlenecks in your process? You can start to do what if analysis. What if I change this round here, or I have more staff on this line, or I have different levels of robots operating on this line, you can really start to understand how it affects your throughputs, your yields, your energy consumption, and how productive you can actually be with your factories. So there's definitely things within the computer world that can help you unlock and realize the future potential of some of your operations and your processing. Now, with some of the robotics and some of the automation systems, there is a skill set that might be required with regarding to coding and programming of some of these, and that can be a bit challenging for the food and drink industry to try and acquire. One area we're really interested in looking at with regards to sort of extended robotics is new advances in how these robotics are programmed. So can this make these technologies more agile within a factory, so more easily and user-friendly to use, but also quicker to set up, quicker to program, quicker to get change from one task through to another task, so you could be much more efficient in your processes. And one particular company, Extend Robotics, are looking at using gesture control. So putting on a virtual headset, using gesture control to actually control the robot, what you need, when you need it, rather than learning what code is required to move a 6-axis robot. So we think this may lower the threshold for the requirements of staff salaries, well, the level of training for staff, and be able to get them more integrated into this automated processing of certain products. Now, I should say some of these technologies and areas that I've talked about, they do come with a cost up front, but the more efficient with the processes and the way that they operate, you'll start to see an improvement on the bottom line with regards to sort of the cost.
To conclude this webinar, product optimization can be applied at various levels to reduce cost, such as reviewing the ingredient supply chain, so looking at your raw material, processing and packaging. Packaging is a key element of a product. It can be used to optimize products in extending the shelf life, to maintain product quality. Using the correct and the right amount of packaging can reduce costs. So really, packaging is a key element of a product and can be used as a visual aid to improve sales, but also to make sure the product quality is maintained. Investing in new technologies can be beneficial in updating or replacing old process equipment to improve your efficiency, reduce the number of steps, and increasing product yield. So really, manufacturers should look into, especially if their processing equipment are quite old, to see if they can really update that, because it can be really beneficial in terms of improving the efficiency, plus it can add automation to the production line, but also it can reduce the amount of processing steps that it requires. So instead of having 10 steps, you may be able to reduce it to 5, meaning that you're saving on time, thus reducing your cost. When making a change to a product ingredient or the processing steps or packaging, the new product needs to be validated to ensure the quality and the safety of the product is maintained, whilst you're meeting the consumer needs and also remaining competitive. This concludes our webinar on product optimization. If you have any questions, please do get in touch with any of the leads here with their direct emails. And if you have any inquiries or would like any support with looking at to see how Camden BRI can support you with optimizing your product, please do get in touch with one of us.